Today I'm going to try to explain why stopping wanting is the hardest thing a human being can do, and today's content is going to bother a lot of people. This video is meant for those who have lived long enough to realize that achieving doesn't fill you up. For those who have already run, already won, already accumulated, and still feel like something is missing that no prize could ever deliver. At the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through a 6-step practice based on the teachings of Lao Tzu, which may be the most important experience you'll have this month. There's a man, somewhere in the world, who signed the contract of his dreams this week. He waited 20 years for it. 3 days later, he woke up at 4 in the morning staring at the ceiling, with the blue light of his phone lighting up his face, feeling that same strange sensation as always, as if something were missing that he can't quite name. Lao Tzu observed this phenomenon 2,500 years ago. And that's what we need to talk about. The restlessness doesn't go away when you get what you wanted. That's the first thing that needs to be said, straight up. Without that fake compassion that self-help books love to use. You've already tested this hypothesis 1,000 times in your life. When you were a kid, you wanted the bicycle. When you got the bicycle, you wanted the video game. When you got the video game, you wanted the motorcycle. When you bought the car, you wanted the house. When you built the house, you wanted the bigger house. And at some point, between the ages of 30 and 50, you looked at everything you had piled up and realized something terrible. Something nobody warned you about. The mountain of achievements had no summit. You always believed there was a point, up there at the top, where you could finally rest, where the soul would go silent, where that quiet voice, whispering more, just a little more, just this one more thing, would finally shut up. But the summit never came. The summit never existed. Each achievement became the base for the next one. Each victory lasted less than the one before, and you started to suspect something that's hard to admit. Maybe the problem wasn't the quantity. Maybe it was the wanting itself. There's a technical name for what happens inside these people, and the discovery is old, from the 70s. Western psychology called this phenomenon hedonic adaptation. The mechanism is simple and cruel at the same time. When you achieve something, your mind feels pleasure for a few days, at most a few weeks. After that, the new level becomes normal. The new car loses its charm. The new house becomes just the house. And since the brain returns to its previous baseline, you need more to feel the same pleasure. It's exactly the mechanism of chemical tolerance. Only here the addiction is to achieving, and nobody warned you that this engine exists. You spend your whole life thinking that next time it will work differently, that the next prize will last. It never lasts. In chapter 46 of the Tao Te Ching, there's an observation that crosses the centuries without needing translation. There is no greater misfortune than not knowing what is enough. Notice the words. Lao Tzu didn't say that misfortune is not having enough. He said that misfortune is not knowing. The problem for him was never material. It was about perception. The man who knows he has enough is rich, even if he owns little. The man who doesn't know is poor, even surrounded by everything. This seems simple when you read it, but it takes decades to sink in. Because wanting, in us, is not a conscious choice. It was installed so early, with so much repetition, in so many commercials, schools, family conversations, that it became your mental breathing. You want without realizing you're wanting. You want while driving. You want while eating. You want while lying down next to the person you love. There's always, deep in your consciousness, a next goal spinning, like an engine that never shuts off. And that engine consumes you from the inside, even when the car is parked. What few people understand is that desire, in the way we live today, is no longer a human instinct. It's become a structure. The entire machinery of modern life depends on you continuing to want. If one day, in the morning, every adult on the planet woke up saying, "I already have enough," the global economy would collapse within 48 hours. That's not an accusation. It's a technical observation. The structural logic of the world we live in was built on the premise that the consumer's desire cannot sleep. There are entire departments in companies you've never even heard of, whose only function is to keep you slightly unsatisfied all the time. Not unhappy to the point of giving up, but restless enough to click, buy, compare, dream about the next phone update. You feel it right now when the notification vibrates in your pocket during dinner with your kids, and your body moves before your conscious decision. It wasn't you who decided to grab the device. It was the structure deciding for you. This market dynamic isn't a moral problem. It just exists, the same way gravity exists. But recognizing it changes everything. Because the moment you realize you're inside a machine designed to make you never feel ready, it becomes easier to understand why that feeling of arriving never arrives. Lao Tzu lived in a time when this machine didn't yet exist, and even so, he already saw the same pattern. He was an archivist at the royal court of the Zhou dynasty in the 6th century BC. He spent his days among bamboo scrolls, recording decrees, wars, the ambitions of princes who wanted more land, more soldiers, more reverence. Around him, an entire civilization was falling apart, precisely because nobody knew how to stop. The rich wanted more gold, the generals wanted more battles, the scholars wanted more disciples. The peasants, crushed beneath all of them, just wanted to survive one more winter. Lao Tzu watched all of this in silence, year after year, and he began to see the secret design of decline. It wasn't the external enemy that destroyed empires. It was the unbridled wanting of the very men who ruled them. When he was already old, according to tradition, he mounted a water buffalo and set off toward the mountains of the west. He was tired of the court, tired of the noise. At the border, before crossing forever, the gatekeeper asked him to leave some written wisdom behind. That's how the 5,000 ideograms of the Tao Te Ching were born. Notice the gesture. The greatest wisdom ever recorded about how to live well was written by a man who was leaving. This detail is important and almost nobody comments on it. Lao Tzu didn't write the Tao Te Ching to build a career. He wasn't looking for followers. He didn't want to found a school. He wasn't trying to become a reference point. He handed over the text the way you'd hand a glass of water to a stranger and went on his way. And maybe that's why the book works. Because it comes from someone who had already left the game. Comparing this with the modern industry of gurus, speakers, and coaches who sell liberation in 12 monthly installments is almost obscene. The true master has nothing to sell. Because he already understood that selling is the first form of trapping. What he offers for free, and right after, he disappears. To understand what Lao Tzu was proposing, you have to start with the word Tao. Western translators usually turn it into path, but the original word says more. Tao is the way things happen when nobody is pushing. It's the river flowing down the mountain. It's the tree growing in the backyard without needing you to pray over it. It's morning arriving after night without warning, without permission, without an agreement. There's an invisible current that moves the universe, and this current isn't violent. It doesn't force, it simply is. Human suffering, according to Taoism, begins exactly at the moment when a man decides he knows more than the current. When he tries to speed up the river, delay old age, hold on to youth, manufacture love, control the outcome of tomorrow's meeting. Each of these attempts is a small conflict with the Tao, and whoever fights with the Tao doesn't win. They just get tired. Imagine a man swimming in a wide river. If he tries to go against the current, he spends all his energy in a few minutes. His muscles lock up. His breathing fails. Panic sets in. But if he flips his body around and swims with the current, the water carries him. He gets farther with less effort. Lao Tzu looked at that and asked a question that changed the destiny of Eastern thought. What if life as a whole could be lived this way? Not as a fight against the water, but as a reading of the current. Not as conquest, but as participation. From that question came the most famous concept of Taoism, the one Westerners translate as non-action, but which has a much more subtle meaning. Wu Wei, effortless action. Doing that doesn't force. Here it's important to clear up a confusion many people carry around. Wu Wei isn't laziness, it isn't giving up. It isn't that arms-crossed attitude of someone waiting for the world to fix itself. Wu Wei is the farmer who plants at the right time, waters in the right amount, and doesn't pull the sprout from the ground, thinking he'll speed up its growth. Wu Wei is the Chinese calligrapher who breathes deeply before the first stroke, lets his hand rest, and when the brush touches the paper, the ink seems to move on its own. Wu Wei is the experienced mother who knows when to speak to her teenage son, and even more, knows when to stay quiet. It's a form of practical intelligence that senses the right time, the right gesture, the right measure, and that trusts that the universe doesn't need to be pushed all the time. Have you ever noticed that the best things in your life came when you stopped pushing for them? That friendship that took years to mature. That project that stalled while you were forcing it and bloomed when you relaxed. That love that arrived when you gave up looking. That's Wu Wei working in you without you knowing its name. There's an old story, attributed to the Taoist Lao Tzu, the intellectual disciple of Lao Tzu, that illustrates this better than any explanation. A cook was carving an ox for Duke Wenhui. Every movement of the knife was precise, without force, without resistance. The ox came apart in clean pieces, as if the animal itself were collaborating with the work. The Duke, impressed, asked how he had achieved such skill. The cook replied that in the beginning he saw only the whole ox. After 3 years, he no longer saw the whole ox. He saw only the parts. But now, he said, I no longer work with my eyes, I work with my spirit. I find the natural spaces between the joints, and I let the blade pass through them. That's why I've used the same knife for 19 years, without ever needing to sharpen it. Other cooks change their knives every month because they cut against the bone. I don't cut. I just find the emptiness that's already there. Stop for a moment on that image. 19 years with the same knife because he learned to see where the universe is already open and to follow through there. Other cooks, according to the ancient text, wore out a new knife every month, not because they worked harder, but because they worked wrong. They forced the blade against the bone, against the tough tendon, against what resisted. The Duke's cook found something else. He found the invisible corridors inside the body of the animal, the spaces that anatomy already offered, and he glided through them without wear. This parable is the best Wu Wei manual ever written. And there's a practical exercise I'm going to teach you at the end of this video based exactly on this principle that reproduces it in 7 minutes. Apply the parable to your week. Where are your knives going dull? They're in the conversations you force, in the results you try to rush, in the people you want to change by force. In each of these situations, there's an invisible bone that your blade is hitting every day. There's also, near that bone, an open space you still haven't seen. Learning to see that space is the work of a lifetime, but it starts today. The problem is that you were raised for the opposite of this. From childhood, they told you that effort is everything, that winning means not giving up, that success is control, that a real man doesn't cry, doesn't stop, doesn't falter. They taught you a single strategy for facing the world, and that strategy is called pushing. Push the goal, push the kid, push yourself. And this philosophy of constant pressure worked for a while. It brought the car, it brought the position, it brought the recognition. But at some point, around 40, 50, 60, the bill starts to come due. High blood pressure, insomnia, that pain in your chest before the meeting, the distant look in your wife's eyes that you don't even notice anymore, the kids who grew up while you were in meetings. There's a line in the Tao Te Ching that sounds like a verdict on this kind of life. He who clings, loses. And the worst part is that we only understand that line after we've already lost a lot. The illusion of control is modernity's favorite poison. Everything promises you control. The meditation app controls your anxiety. The watch controls your steps. The spreadsheet controls your money. The algorithm controls what you see. And you, in the middle of all this, believe you're in command, when in reality you're being controlled by devices you yourself chose. The ancient Taoist would laugh at this, but he'd laugh with sadness, because man has never been further from the Tao than right now, precisely when he imagines himself the lord of everything. Think about how many variables have to go right for you to get to work tomorrow. The alarm has to go off, the electricity has to be working, the car has to start. Traffic has to flow at least a little. The light has to turn green. The elevator has to go up. None of these things are under your real control. You just trust. And that silent trust, which you don't even realize you're exercising every day, is an involuntary form of Tao. You already live inside the current. You just don't admit it. When something goes wrong, when the tire blows or the power goes out, you feel how fragile that castle of guarantees you imagined controlling really was. You know it's true. And it's precisely in that recognition that a different kind of tranquility appears. The tranquility of someone who understands they're supported by a network they didn't build, and that keeps working day after day without needing their authorization. Here we arrive at one of the most beautiful teachings of the Tao Te Ching, which is in chapter 11. There's a passage near the beginning of the book where Lao Tzu looks at a bowl and makes an observation that nobody before him had formulated with such precision. The usefulness of the bowl, he writes, is not in the clay it was made from. It's in the empty space that exists inside it. Without emptiness, there's no bowl, there's only stone. Then he looks at a carriage wheel. The usefulness of the wheel is not in the wooden spokes, it's in the hole in the middle, where the axle goes. Then he looks at a house. The usefulness of the house is not in the walls, it's in the windows and doors, in the space between the furniture where a life can happen. And then he concludes with a sentence that should be written in big letters on the wall of every office in the world. The full serves us. The empty makes us useful. Stop for a second and apply this to your life. Where is the emptiness in your week? Is there any hour in your day when nothing has to happen? Some 15-minute space where you're not producing, not consuming, not answering messages, not planning. For most people, the honest answer is no. The calendar is full, the house is full, the head is full, the phone is full, and this complete crowding, which seems like the sign of a successful life, is exactly what strips your existence of its usefulness. You've become a bowl with no inside, a house with no windows, a wheel with no hole in the middle. There's matter, there's weight, there's volume, but there's no space where life could enter. Notice that this phenomenon of excess isn't just yours. It's generational, it's cultural, it's structural. There are respected studies that argue the average worker in the United States today works more hours per year than an English peasant in the 13th century. Read that sentence again. A medieval man who lived tied to the land under a structure of serfdom had more days off throughout the year than a contemporary American executive. The religious holidays, the community festivals, the truly free Sundays, all of that added up to more empty space on the calendar than what's left on your schedule today. And that wasn't poverty of opportunity, it was richness of presence. The ancient man, with all his material hardship, still knew what a whole day without producing anything felt like. You might not even remember the last time you lived a day like that. This diagnosis hurts because it's true. And it hurts even more when you realize nobody forced you to fill everything up. You volunteered. You thought you were gaining something. And you paid with the emptiness that was holding you up. The more you want, the less you have. That sentence sounds like a paradox, but it's offered in the Tao Te Ching as a clinical diagnosis. He who wants a lot lives in lack, even surrounded by everything, because constant wanting is a permanent way of telling yourself that something is still not complete. Every desire is a small message your mind sends you, saying here is still missing. And when these messages don't stop, you spend your whole life in a kind of subscription to insufficiency. It doesn't matter how much money comes into the account. It doesn't matter how much praise arrives. It doesn't matter how many friends hug you. The message keeps coming. Here is still missing. And you respond to each message with more effort, more searching, more pushing, without realizing that the source of the messages isn't the world. It's your way of looking at the world. There's a thought experiment that helps you understand this. Imagine two people with the same salary, the same house, the same car, the same family. The first one spends the day thinking about what he doesn't have yet. His co-worker's bigger salary, his neighbor's nicer house, his brother's new car, his friend's tighter family. The second one spends the day noticing what he already has. The salary that pays the bills, the house that shelters him, the car that runs, the family that's there. Materially, they're identical. Emotionally, they live on different planets. The first lives in absolute poverty, even if nobody notices. The second lives in deep richness, even if nobody invents a story about it. And the difference between them isn't outside. It's in a tiny adjustment of perception. That adjustment is perhaps the greatest achievement possible for a human being. And it's exactly what Lao Tzu called knowing what is enough. Knowing what is enough is not renouncing ambition. It's not stopping work. It's not settling for mediocrity. It's something else, more subtle and more difficult. It's being able, in the middle of any project, to remember that your life doesn't depend on that outcome. You'll work with seriousness. You'll deliver the best you can. You'll chase what makes sense. But deep down, you know your peace isn't tied to the success of the venture. If it works out, great, you celebrate. If it doesn't, you learn and move on. The difference between this posture and that of the man desperate to achieve is invisible from the outside, but absolute on the inside. One lives in peace, even working hard. The other lives at war, even on vacation at the beach. And only after a few decades do we realize which of the two actually had a life. Modern life, however, has turned every space into an arena. If you open your phone, you see other people's success. If you walk into the office, you see the competition for promotion. If you go to a friend's wedding, you compare your marriage to his. If you go to the gym, you measure your body against the body next to you. Everything has become a contest, even where the contest is ridiculous. In chapter 22 of the Tao Te Ching, a sentence appears that seems simple and hides a revolution. Because he does not compete, no one can compete with him. Think about what that means. The sage is not someone who wins competitions. He's someone who steps out of the competition. And by stepping out, he can no longer be defeated by anyone, because nobody can beat you at a game you're no longer playing. This is a form of freedom that the world of continuous performance can't even imagine. But how do you step out in practice? How do you stop competing in a world that seems to demand competition all the time? Here we have to be honest. It's not simple. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and just stop comparing. The brain has been trained for decades for this. The automatic reaction will keep happening. The difference is somewhere else. It's in noticing the comparison as soon as it comes up, and not believing it. You see a photo of a coworker on a tropical beach. You feel the tightness in your chest. That tightness is the competition trying to fire up the engine. You used to follow the impulse. You'd start thinking about how to get a trip just like that. Now, you just notice. You look at the tightness, you breathe, and you think, calmly, this is the game calling me back in. And you go on with your life. The photo loses its grip. The engine doesn't fire up. You gained a day. Repeat that small gesture 1,000 times, and what changes in you is structural. You're not repressing the desire. You're not pretending you don't feel anything. You've just stopped obeying every call. Taoism would call this returning to the Tao. You're coming back to the current. You're letting go of the oars against the water. You're letting the river do what it has known how to do for millions of years. And it's incredible how, when you stop pushing, life finally starts moving in the right direction. The right people show up. Opportunities arrive without you forcing them. The exhaustion that came from excessive effort turns into a different kind of tiredness. The good tiredness of someone who did what they had to do and went to sleep in peace. Water is the symbol Lao Tzu chose to represent this calm force. In chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching, he writes that the highest virtue is like water. Water benefits all things and does not contend with them. It goes to the places men despise, and that's why it's close to the Tao. Stop and think about that. Water doesn't shine. It doesn't show off. It doesn't ask for admiration. It seeks the lowest point, the valley, the bottom of the earth. And even so, it's the most powerful substance on the planet. It wears down rock over time. It cuts through mountains. It carves canyons. Not with brute force, with patience and consistency. The Grand Canyon in Arizona takes this principle to the limit of the imaginable. A crack in the Earth's crust more than 400 kilometers long, more than 1,800 meters deep at some points, carved over approximately 6 million years by the Colorado River. Think about that. A single river, never speeding up its own rhythm, never making extra effort, never being in a hurry, cut one of the most spectacular landscapes on the planet just by persisting. Water never tried to be stone. It just kept being water. And it was that loyalty to its own nature that made it capable of transforming everything around it. Here's a lesson that lasts a lifetime. You don't need to be the stone to defeat the stone. You just need to keep being what you are, with consistency, without straying from your nature, and time will do the rest. The person who internalizes this becomes, within their environment, a presence that changes everything without needing to shout. They're not the loudest one in the meeting. They're not the first to speak. They're not always promoting themselves, but when they speak, everyone listens. When they act, something falls into place. That's the authority of water, and it's worth more than 1,000 titles on a business card. Knowing yourself is the real achievement. One of the most commented on verses by scholars of the Tao Te Ching says that he who knows others is intelligent, but he who knows himself is enlightened. And this sentence, apparently simple, contains a complete turn on what it means to be successful in life. The first half of existence, generally, is dedicated to knowing others. You study how the market works, how your bosses think, how your clients react, how your kids behave, what your wife expects. All of this is necessary, and you learn it through practice. But there comes a point, usually around 40, when this skill is already consolidated. You already know how to read the world. The problem is that during all those years, you forgot to read yourself. And when, in an unexpected moment of silence, you turn inward, you realize a stranger lives in there. A man you never had time to visit, who has pains you never heard, dreams you abandoned, fears you never admitted to, qualities you don't even know you have. This encounter happens normally, in absurdly ordinary moments. Not on expensive spiritual retreats, not on trips to India. It happens when you're sitting alone in the kitchen at 11:47 at night, the smell of reheated coffee from your third cup rising from the mug, the computer screen still reflected in the back of your tired eye, and suddenly a question rises up without warning from that place you never visit. What am I doing with my life? And the question doesn't come with drama. It comes with the calm of someone who waited 30 years to be heard. You sit there, holding the warm mug, and you discover you don't have an answer, and that maybe you never did. The encounter with this inner man is the most important adventure of the second half of life, and it's also the most postponed, because the outside world keeps calling. The phone rings, the bills arrive, the kids ask for things, and there always seems to be a legitimate reason to put off the dive into yourself one more day, one more week, one more year. But there's an old warning, with that calm of someone who has watched a lot of people miss this opportunity. If you don't know yourself, you'll die as a stranger in your own house. You'll have spent 80 years inhabiting a body you never called your own, inside a mind you never explored, with a soul you never listened to. Is there anything sadder than that? Carl Jung, who deeply studied Eastern thought and wrote prefaces for German editions of classical Taoist texts, left behind a sentence that speaks directly to Lao Tzu. He said that what is not brought to consciousness manifests as fate. It means, in other words, that everything you don't see in yourself will show up in your life as an event, as a marriage crisis, as a child who pulls away, as an illness that appears without warning, as chronic dissatisfaction in a job that seemed perfect. Self-knowledge, then, is not a luxury for idle people. It's the only way to keep what you ignore inside yourself from turning into catastrophe on the outside. And the earlier this exploration begins, the better. But even at 50, at 60, at 70, there's still time. The Tao's time is different from clock time. There's no hour to start. There's only now. Further on, I'll reveal the step almost nobody practices, and that's what separates those who read the Tao Te Ching from those who lived the Tao Te Ching. But before that, we need to talk about a specific trap. There's an enormous danger in living to be somebody. It's in chapter 13 that the warning appears about the relationship between name, honor, and disgrace. Those who live dependent on the approval of others live imprisoned. Every compliment is a momentary relief. Every criticism is a wound. Your whole life starts to revolve around reputation. And reputation is a shadow. It has no weight, no body, no substance. You can spend 40 years building an impeccable reputation and lose it in one afternoon. Not because you did something wrong, but because the wind of public opinion changed direction. Whoever bets their life on that shadow wakes up old discovering they don't know who they are underneath the name they built. I've come across, in conversations and readings, cases of men who reached the top of their professions and discovered, at the moment of retirement, that nothing was left of them outside the position. They were important doctors, respected businessmen, feared attorneys. But outside the office, they were ghosts. They didn't know what they liked to eat. They didn't have a hobby. They had no friends outside professional interest. They didn't know how to talk to their own wife outside of work. And when the external structure fell, they fell with it. Some got sick within months. Others sank into deep depressions. Not because retirement was bad, but because retirement revealed that they had spent their whole lives building a house on the outside, and on the inside, it was all empty. That's exactly what Lao Tzu tried to warn us about with that text of 5,000 ideograms. To be somebody to others, without being anybody to yourself, is a premature death. Silence, in this process, is the master. It's in the middle of the book that the harshest sentence in this sense appears. He who speaks does not know, and he who knows does not speak. This sentence bothers a lot of people, because we live in an era where speaking has become proof of existence. Whoever doesn't post doesn't exist. Whoever doesn't give an opinion is invisible. Whoever doesn't reply fast enough is considered slow. But the ancient sage would point in another direction. Talking too much is, in many cases, a symptom of not having listened enough. The people who teach you the most in your life are usually the ones who speak the least. The grandfather who said few words, and each one was worth gold. The teacher who listened before answering. The friend who stayed silent at your side in the worst moment, and that was enough. Silence communicates things that speech can't reach, and inhabiting it is one of the oldest practices for accessing the Tao. But silence is scary. You have to acknowledge that. When you sit alone, without a phone, without television, without music, without noise, the first thing that comes up is a wave of restlessness. The body moves. The mind wants to escape. Uncomfortable thoughts come up, postponed memories, questions you don't want to answer. It's as if, in the absence of external stimulation, all the material you'd pushed into the basement of consciousness rose up at the same time. That's why most people can't stand 5 minutes sitting alone. It's not a lack of time. It's a lack of courage. There's a famous experiment conducted by American psychologists and published in the journal Science in 2014 that illustrates this in an almost brutal way. The researchers left volunteers alone in an empty room, without a phone, without a book, without any stimulation, for just 15 minutes. The only option they had, if they wanted, was to press a button that delivered a small, unpleasant electric shock. Before the experiment, all the participants had stated that they would pay to avoid that shock. Even so, during the 15 minutes alone, most of the men preferred to press the button and give themselves shocks rather than simply sit there with their own thoughts. Read that sentence again. They preferred known physical pain to unknown inner silence. That's the size of human resistance to emptiness. And it's exactly that emptiness that Lao Tzu asks you to visit. The phone rings all the time because silence hurts. And while you're running from that silence, you're running from yourself. Actually, notice this. You only realize how noisy the environment is when the office air conditioner suddenly shuts off. That low, continuous hum, which seemed like the sound of nothing, was actually a constant sound. Your mind lives off that same hum. Thoughts, memories, plans, comparisons, rolling on without interruption. And you'll only discover real inner silence when that hum, for a few seconds, finally stops. And then, the whole world changes without anything changing on the outside. There's an ancient practice, contemporary with Lao Tzu himself, that the Taoist monks of the Wudang Mountains still preserve. They call it zuowang, sitting and forgetting. It's not meditation in the modern sense. It's not trying to think about nothing. It's sitting and letting the mind discover on its own that it doesn't have to always be turned on. The monks say the first days of practice are unbearable. The mind protests, the body aches, boredom sets in. But at some point, after weeks or months, something gives. A stillness that isn't built, but found. As if the mind itself had decided to rest. You don't get there in 15 minutes, but the path begins in the first 15 minutes. And most people never take that first step, because silence, at first glance, seems like the most useless thing in the world. Only later do you discover it was the most useful thing. Life has a movement that appears with crystal clarity in chapter 40. This particular passage, translated literally, sounds like this. Returning is the movement of the Tao. Everything that rises, falls. Everything that expands, contracts. Everything that moves away from the center, comes back. This movement is the most fundamental law of the universe, and it's also the law of your biography, if you pay attention. In your youth, you move away. You leave home, you build a career, you explore the world, you accumulate, you achieve, you make a name. But there comes a moment, usually between 40 and 60, when something starts to turn. The direction of the movement reverses. You feel like simplifying, like having fewer commitments, like seeing your kids more calmly, like taking care of the yard, like reading the book that stayed on the shelf, like going back to a city from your childhood. This return isn't regression. It isn't failure. It's maturation. It's the Tao fulfilling itself within your life. The problem is that modern Western culture hasn't known how to make this return with dignity. We treat aging as defeat. We try to prolong youth with surgeries, supplements, extreme workouts, pretending we're still 30 when we're 60. We fight with the mirror. We fight with retirement. We fight with the loss of functions. And in that fight, we lose the most beautiful opportunity that the second half of life offers, the chance to finally slow down, to finally do what we always wanted, to finally listen to what we always postponed. Recent neuroscience research has shown that starting around age 50, the human brain enters a phase of greater integration between hemispheres, generating a wisdom different from the intelligence of youth. This wisdom doesn't compete in speed, but it competes in depth. It's exactly the kind of mind Lao Tzu describes as ready for the Tao. It's not a coincidence that practically every ancient tradition, from India to Greece, reserved the roles of counselors and masters for the elderly. They had what no book delivers: years of defeat, of error, of return. And that's precisely what produces that wisdom the young can't speed up. The cultures that still preserve some trace of Eastern wisdom treat the elder with a different reverence, not as a burden, but as a distillation of time. In some remote villages in Japan, in Korea, in parts of rural China, the elder is still heard in the community's important decisions. Because he has already made the return, he has already seen the Tao completing itself. He has something to say that the young don't yet know. Letting go is harder than achieving. This is a sentence that needs to be said seriously, without the deceptive lightness of motivational texts. Achieving has a clear structure. You want, you run, you get. There's a path, a formula, a visible reward. Letting go has none of that. There's no manual. There's no external prize. Nobody applauds you for giving up on a fight, for abandoning an ambition that no longer served you, for forgiving someone who hurt you years ago. Letting go happens in silence, and it requires a different kind of courage than the courage to fight. It requires the courage not to fight. For a man raised his whole life on the logic of contest, this looks almost like weakness. But it's the opposite. It's the highest form of strength, because it's the strength that doesn't need to show itself. Modern neuroscience has demonstrated that every recurring thought creates a physical path in the brain, a neural trail that becomes deeper the more it's used. When you hold on to a grudge for 10 years, you are literally carving a groove in your nervous system. It's not just psychological, it's biological. And undoing that groove takes time, because the brain needs to open an alternative, healthier path, and slowly redirect traffic to the new route. That explains why the sentence, "I get it, I'll let go," doesn't work overnight. Understanding is instant. The neural reconfiguration takes months, sometimes years. Lao Tzu didn't have MRI images, but he knew this in another way. That's why he insisted so much on the idea of daily practice. Not one big, definitive letting go. 1,000 small lettings go, day after day, opening the new path. There's a passage near the end of the book where a rare observation appears in his work, with an almost melancholy tone. His words are easy to understand and easy to practice, but almost nobody manages it. Why? Because intellectual intelligence catches on quickly. "Ah, I get it. I need to let go." But the body, the habit, the emotional structure, those take years to catch up. You know what you should do, and you keep doing the opposite. You keep clinging to the same fights, the same resentments, the same old desires that no longer match who you've become. Knowing is easy, doing is the work of a lifetime. But the important point is that this doing doesn't require grand gestures. It requires small lettings go, every day. Letting go of an expectation you had about your child. Letting go of a grudge from 20 years ago. Letting go of a comparison with a coworker. Letting go of the obsession with being right in an argument. Each of these gestures seems tiny, but the sum of them, after months and years, builds an inner freedom that no money in the world can buy. Think of a concrete example. You have an argument with your wife after dinner. Something trivial, like where to keep the car keys. The argument ends, but the feeling doesn't. You go to bed, lie down, close your eyes, and discover that you're still debating in your head, reinforcing your arguments, imagining the perfect comeback you'll give tomorrow. That's the neural groove working in real time. It wasn't your wife who stole your sleep. It was your attachment to your own being right. And here is the invisible exercise of Taoism applied. You recognize the groove. You say without drama to yourself, "I could be sleeping right now, but I'm here winning an argument that's already over." And you let go. You don't let go because your wife was right. You let go because sleeping is more important than winning. The next day, you wake up rested. The argument lost 70% of its importance, and you won a bigger victory than the victory you were trying to get. The victory over your own groove. The central shift Taoism offers is this. When you stop chasing life, life starts coming to you, not as a mystical reward, not as a miracle, but as perception. You simply start seeing what was always there and you didn't see, the wife sleeping next to you, whom you spent years not really looking at. The child in the living room with the phone in his hand, whom you never sat down to ask how he's doing. The morning that comes through the window every Wednesday and that you never stop to receive. The bread on the breakfast table that has a smell you've forgotten how to describe. The sound of the key turning in the lock when you come home late, and which used to be the sweetest sound of your day until it became just noise. The breath that goes in and out of your nose, 60 years now, and which you've never thanked once. There's a recurring scene in the accounts of people who have had near-death experiences in American and European hospitals, recorded in serious medical studies of recent decades. When these people come back, almost all of them describe the same thing. It wasn't the great achievements that mattered. It wasn't the position, the salary, the recognition. It was the smell of the house where they grew up, the face of the mother in the kitchen, the hug from a friend on a specific winter night. Small details, apparently unimportant, that suddenly revealed themselves to contain a whole life. These people come back changed, not because they saw another world, because they saw this one, finally, for the first time. The Tao doesn't give you more things. It gives you back the capacity to see the things you already have. There's a principle hidden in this return, and it's perhaps the most important secret of the Tao Te Ching, even though Lao Tzu never formulated it in a single sentence. The principle is that your current life, exactly as it is today, already has within it Everything you need to be happy. Nothing is missing. You're not missing that better car, that bigger house, that higher position, that international trip, that public recognition. All of that may or may not happen, and your happiness doesn't depend on it. What's missing, if anything is missing, is the looking. It's the presence. It's the capacity to be where you are, with whom you're with, in the moment you're in, without mentally escaping to somewhere else. Recent neuroscience research has shown that the human mind spends around 47% of its time wandering, thinking about something other than what's being done at that moment. And that wandering is strongly correlated with unhappiness. When we're thinking about the past, we feel regret. When we're thinking about the future, we feel anxiety. The only form of sustainable mental peace is being in the present. Lao Tzu reached the same conclusion 2,500 years ago, just by observing ordinary man. Suffering lives in wanting to go somewhere else. Peace lives in being where you are. Picture the scene. You're at home, dinner is over, the dishes are in the sink. You sit on the couch. The body is there. But the mind is already on tomorrow's report, on the unanswered email, on the conversation that didn't get finished. The computer screen is still reflected in the back of your tired eye, even after the device is closed. The body on the couch, the mind somewhere else. And meanwhile, real life, the only one that exists, is passing by unnoticed right in front of you. The Tao isn't anywhere except this instant. And while you're not present in it, the Tao can't reach you. And then the silence answers. There's a simple technique to start coming out of this state of absent mind, and the ancient Taoists called it returning to the senses. It's nothing sophisticated. When you notice your mind is in 1,000 places, choose just one of your 5 senses and dive into it for 10 seconds. Only the texture of the cushion under your hand. Only the ambient sound of the house. Only the smell of the air in this room. This small sensory dive pulls the mind back to the body, and the body is the only place where now exists. Mind without body travels freely between past and future. Mind anchored in the body can only inhabit the present. That's why all ancient spiritual paths, without exception, begin with the body. It's not mysticism. It's the anatomy of attention. It's exactly this presence we're going to work on now. Because so far you've heard a lot of theory. Lao Tzu and the chapters of the book, parables from 2,000 years ago. All of that is important. But Taoism was never a philosophy meant to be read. It was always a philosophy meant to be practiced. In chapter 48, a sentence appears that shows the difference between knowing and the path. To learn, you add day by day. To follow the Tao, you take away day by day. You spent decades adding. Now it's time to practice taking away. And that's why this video ends with an experience, not with a conclusion. I'm going to guide you now through a 6-step practice based directly on the teachings of the Tao Te Ching. It takes between 6 and 8 minutes. You can do it sitting where you are. You don't need an app, you don't need music, you don't need a cushion. You only need your body, your breath, and the willingness to try. The practice is called the emptying. It's grounded directly in 3 passages from the Tao Te Ching. Chapter 11, on the usefulness of emptiness. Chapter 16, where the verse appears, reach supreme emptiness, hold firmly to stillness. And chapter 48, on daily subtraction. Let's go. Step 1. Sit and breathe. Sit with your spine upright, your feet flat on the floor, your hands resting on your legs, palms facing down. Close your eyes if it's comfortable. If you prefer, lower your gaze to a fixed point about 3 feet in front of you. Breathe through your nose, slowly and deeply, 3 times. With each exhale, let your shoulders drop a little more. Feel the weight of the day you carried up to here going down through your arms and out through your fingertips. To reach emptiness, you first have to arrive at stillness. Start by arriving. Don't try to make anything happen, just arrive. Step 2. Identify a desire that is weighing on you. In silence, with your eyes closed, ask yourself a question. What am I wanting too much today? It might be an answer you're hoping to get from someone. It might be a professional outcome. It might be recognition. It might be certainty about the future. It might be that everything goes well tomorrow. It might be that a certain person changes. Don't force the answer. Just wait, in silence, and observe what comes. Usually the first thought that appears is the true one. It's not the pretty thought you choose to show others. It's the one that's actually weighing on you today. Step 3. Name that desire. Say, quietly or mentally, with all the clarity you can manage, I am wanting, and complete with what came up. I am wanting that conversation tomorrow to go well. I am wanting my son to call me. I am wanting the test result to be good. I am wanting that person to apologize. Recognizing is the first act of freedom. You can't let go of what you can't see. Most of our desires live in a foggy state, acting on us without ever appearing clearly. Naming pulls the desire out of the shadow and puts it in the light. Only there can it be worked with. Step 4. Practice letting go. Breathe in deeply, taking the air down to the bottom of your abdomen. As you exhale slowly, imagine that desire leaving with the air, like a dry leaf detaching from the branch at the end of autumn, without resistance, without drama, without sadness, just because the time has come. Repeat this for 5 complete breaths. Each exhale takes a little of the desire away. You don't have to eliminate the desire forever. That would be impossible and unnecessary. It's enough to let it go for now. You're not giving up the intention. You're letting go of the grip you had on the outcome. To follow the Tao, you take away day by day. This is your taking away for the day. Small, simple, real. Step 5. Observe the space that's left. After the 5 breaths, stay still for 30 seconds to a minute, just noticing what remains in the place where that tightness used to be. Maybe you feel a light relief. Maybe you feel an inner silence that wasn't there before. Maybe you don't feel anything, and that's okay too. Chapter 11 of the Tao Te Ching teaches that the usefulness of the bowl is in the emptiness it carries. The space left in you after letting go of the desire is the same kind of emptiness. It's not lack, it's possibility. It's the place where new life can enter when the old wanting has finally stopped occupying the entire inner environment. Step 6. Return to the world slowly. Open your eyes slowly. Look around as if you were seeing for the first time. The wall, the light, the window, the objects around you. Notice how the world looks the same, but you're slightly different. It wasn't the world that changed. It was you that stopped pushing it. That's the central point of Taoism. It's not the world that needs adjusting. It's the way you position yourself within it. Do this practice once a day for 7 days. But don't believe me. Just do it. Understanding philosophy is interesting. Practicing philosophy can change your life. Start with the link I left in the first pinned comment. Now I need you. Before you go, do 3 quick things. First, write in the comments where you're watching from. I'd like to know how many different corners of the world people are reaching this from, breathing together, trying to empty out a little. And I want to take this chance to invite you to our members club, where we have exclusive content. I'll see you in the next video.